welcome to this week's edition of Buckeye Blueprint, your weekly source for Ohio State football analysis. My name is Colin Hossel, and I'm joined as always by Nick McWilliams and Jacob Myers of the Lantern. And wow, what a difference a week makes. Last week, we discussed Ohio State's 4-point victory to a Northwestern team that has a loss to Illinois State on their resume. And this week, we got a glimpse of the 2016 Buckeyes at their absolute peak. So what happened in between that game and this game versus Nebraska?
You know, I thought about this at halftime. They were up 31-3 at half and looked at the stats. There really wasn't a huge difference from the week before, but as anyone watching, and we obviously thought, okay, this is a lot better than Northwestern, and the conclusion I came to was the pace of play. OSU, they even continued it in the second half. One of the most glaring things for me was they only had one touchdown drive over 5 minutes long, and that one was 98 yards in 11 plays, so still very efficient. One of the drives was a 15-play drive of 85 yards that took 3.5 minutes. They had one very similar against Northwestern that took over 8 minutes. So you see that up-tempo style of play, and I mean, OSU really, I think they have to stick with that to duplicate success like they had on Saturday.
And they started out the game with the turnover, which is one of those things that we've seen Ohio State do in their blowouts this year. And one thing that I do think is interesting is Ohio State's had many games where they lay on these big scores and they hold the other team to 0 or 3 points, something really low, and it's an incredible margin of victory. Why do you think that they're able to get up by such a quick margin and then hold on to that throughout the game?
Well, you know, Jacob made the point about the offense being the real key here. You know, quick plays, getting up to the line quickly, getting the play going. I think it was on the other end. I think it was the defense so far. You know, at the beginning of this season, that's what we watched Ohio State. Everyone was amazed by how well the Buckeyes defense was playing. And, you know, to start this game, Damon Webb started off with a big interception return for a touchdown. And I think with the reemergence of the defense as being that airtight on the opposing teams, that's why Ohio State was able to surmount this really, really big lead.
And I think one of the reasons they're able to do that, though, is not necessarily that they haven't played as well in recent weeks. It's just they matched up really well against Nebraska. Their cornerbacks are made for a team like Nebraska who's going to throw it down the field. And it's not like they have a weakness in their interior where Nebraska can just run it down their throat. I really don't see that as an issue that Ohio State has. So looking forward, does this game tell us anything about the defense, or does it tell us what we already knew, that they're not going to allow these deep passes and you're going to have to beat them like Northwestern did, where they had a slot receiver in Austin Carr who racked up 150 yards?
Well, I think the defense has kind of been overshadowed a little bit this year, especially the secondary. I've always thought of them as kind of lockdown corner guys. You know, that had been a point of discussion the last 2 years. OSU really only having one guy, and there would be a cornerback, maybe it's Marshawn Lattimore this year, just kind of steps into the fold and becomes that guy. They have two legit lockdown cornerbacks out there on defense, and Denzel Ward probably had his best game of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I also think it has something to do with the fact that they didn't really play tight. You know, the last few weeks, that's what we've been watching. You know, the entire defense seems like they've been scared of giving up the big play. They've just been scared of making a mistake. You know, you didn't really see that on Saturday. You know, you watched Conley play really airtight coverage. Did get a pass interference call early on, but, you know, Kerry Combs is not going to be upset whenever you defend a guy from a 50-yard touchdown giving up a 15-yard pass interference, as long as you're playing decent defense and not just tackling the guy.
Yeah, Nebraska quarterback just went 9 for 33.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it was just a really good lesson in how well this team can play when they play loose, when they play like, you know what, this is our territory in Ohio Stadium. And it just showed that these guys have the skill that can really put this team at the top.
And one big part of the game was when Tommy Armstrong Jr. got hit out of bounds, and he had that scary incident where it took a really long time, and we really didn't know what happened. It turned out that it wasn't as bad as we originally anticipated. But on the field, do you think that missing Tommy Armstrong, Nebraska could just never recover? Was it a different team? Was the game over at that point?
Well, I think, first of all, it was wonderful to see him come back out on the field there in the second half.
Totally agree.
And, you know, he's arguably one of their biggest playmakers, and I think they really lean on him. OSU knew their game plan. I think everyone kind of knew what it was. If you survive on the deep ball, they completed a few, but that's what Nebraska does. If you survive on that, then it's going to be a good game. You know, they really held Tommy Armstrong at bay there in that first half when he was in there. So was it a big difference? You know, there was definitely a drop-off when he went out of there, but the outcome, I still thought it was still going to be a blowout regardless.
Yeah, I agree. And so usually we talk about the offense first, and we just sort of naturally went on to the defense. But I know we do want to discuss the offense because in recent weeks we've talked about Curtis Samuel and his usage. And I know, Nick, you have been, I guess I don't want to you say your opinion because you think that we have been misportraying you.
Well, it's not so much that Curtis Samuel is not a fantastic player. I've said that before. We all agree on that. Curtis Samuel is probably the best playmaker on this team. But I think the reason that he's went away for the past few weeks and all of a sudden really made a resurgence in the past 2 weeks is because they're finally using him in the way that they have to absolutely use him. You know, you saw that opening play in the second half, 75 yards over the middle with him on single coverage. We've seen how fast he is. We've seen how quick he is. He's going to break away on corners when he has single coverage. Before, we were watching him on swing passes and out routes and stuff. That's not the kind of player he is. He only had in this game, 5 carries, I believe. And, you know, most of those carries were sweeps. He occasionally went up the middle and everything. He's not in between the tackles runner, so they can't use him in that regard either. You saw Mike Weber carrying the load of those short yardage carries and in between the tackles. This is why I think Curtis Samuel looks so good today. Or on Saturday. I don't know why I keep saying today. But it's because of the execution of this team and how they are utilizing him. You have to put him in scenarios where he's going to have single coverage over the middle. You have to put him in scenarios where he can break away from defenders on the edge.
Yeah, on his big touchdown pass, first play out of halftime, I think that's when you kind of knew the route was really on and this could get out of hand. He said he saw the matchup with the nickelback and just ran a post route and JT hit him. That's the type of matchups that you really have to exploit with your best playmaker. And where I may disagree with you is him being an inside runner. Although short yardage downs, I would rather obviously have Mike Weber in there if OSU was going to convert. But I think he can run those little inside runs. But yeah, he's much more effective over the middle of the field when they just have him on like the Marcus Ball routes that you saw early when Marcus Ball is the first read. They little curl routes there on the inside, little button hooks, just hit them right there. I think that's what really separates OSU, and they're able to have a balanced offense.
That's him in the slot. That's where he's the most deadliest. I mean, that's where he can
Absolutely.
really make those kind of plays. So, I would be interested to see if they start utilizing him more in like what we saw against Wisconsin, where they kept using Jazz Peavy as a sweep from coming out of the slot. Maybe we'll see that play come out because Corey Smith ran a few of those plays against Nebraska.
I thought you might say something that I would disagree with way more.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty sure that we're all three finally on the same page after 3 or 4 weeks of disagreement. This is how you use Curtis Samuel, and he had how many total yards? About 150, 178. Yeah, that's a great way to use him.
The one thing I will say though is, I believe if they tried to plug in someone else to this position that they put Curtis Samuel in, they wouldn't have as much success as Samuel because we do all agree that he's a great player.
It would not.
Be that as it may, I think if they really want him to keep putting up those numbers, they have to put him in this position. You know, a lot of people seem to think that Samuel could be the guy who could just put the team on his back and do whatever. Well, he's still got to have some help from the rest of that offense.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't think I guess the original argument was that we think that Curtis Samuel should get more touches.
Right.
He's got more touches.
And I think you finally agreed to that this week. Whereas, last week he wouldn't get the ball after he had those big gains. And where, at least to me, it seemed like they consistently used him every 4 or 5 plays. Maybe went to back to him. They did to open the game. But after that, I mean, it was very consistent when they would get the ball, and it really flowed with the offense.
Yeah, so just in closing, what did we really learn about this game? Do we think that this game was sort of a matchup that Ohio State, they really did match up well, Ohio State's defense against Nebraska's offense, in my opinion. Did we learn that their defense was a lot better? Did we learn something about their offense that we didn't previously know?
I mean, before the game, I thought, that's what you're going to get with OSU's offense. You're going to get these less than 40-point games, but obviously that's not the case anymore. I think this can be the benchmark, or at least the top where OSU can get to. And I guess fans had a reason to expect this.
Yeah, not only that, I think we also learned that KJ Hill might actually have a future in this offense. Before, it's not that we disagreed that he didn't have a future, but it was the fact, when are we going to see him? When is he actually going to be utilized? Against Nebraska, he had 5 receptions, and he averaged over 10 yards of reception easily. And that's what I really think that this team needs to start understanding is that, they have the playmakers at wide receiver. Just put them in the position that they can produce. Don't let KJ Hill run short little 3-yard routes. He's a speed receiver. They really have to get him down the field.
Well, Meyer said after the game that this was the wide receiver's best game. They finally ran those crisp routes that he had been looking for. And, it'll be interesting to see if they can continue that down the road now with 3 games left.
And it's a good thing that he said that, because it's interesting, because the previous week after the Northwestern game, he was not exactly pleased about that. I'm pretty sure he said basically the exact opposite of that. All right, so let's move on to the Ohio State-Maryland game.
One of the main storylines for Ohio State's offense this year has been their lack of production from the wide receiver position. However, quarterback J.T. Barrett does have a favorite target. It's not a wide receiver, though. It's Curtis Samuel, leading the team with 52 catches. The versatile H-back has had 5 touchdowns on the ground and then 5 touchdowns through the air this season. In Saturday's game against Nebraska, he had his best game since week 1 against Bowling Green. He had 8 catches for 137 yards and brought in 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for 41 yards, averaging just over 8 yards a carry. Ohio State as a whole has an opportunity to continue their success next week against Maryland. Ranked 7th in the Big Ten in pass defense, the Terrapins give up an average of around 204 passing yards per game and have given up 12 touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks. If Samuel can have that kind of game against the 20th best defense in the country, he should have a big day against Maryland this Saturday.
Last week, Michigan laid it on Maryland to the tune of a 59-3 drubbing. And this week, Ohio State heads to College Park to take on the Terrapins. Given the fact that Ohio State just won 62-3 against Nebraska, should we expect sort of a similar beatdown of Maryland?
Well, Maryland started this year 4-0, and I think a lot of people were a little bit surprised by that. They're like, wow, maybe the Terrapins might actually do something in the Big Ten this season.
But no.
The last 5 games they've lost 4, and the only one that they've beat is the only one that they've won is against the Michigan State team that I think we're all very, very disappointed in, I guess you could say. And Maryland's defense, they struggled all year. Against the pass they haven't been too bad, but it's the rush defense that they have had a severe problem in. And what's Ohio State known for? Running the football and running it until the other team begs for mercy. So I really do think that this is going to be a game that Maryland's once again going to lose 5 out of the last 6.
Well, they've really been hurt with injuries too. Will Likely was an All-American caliber defensive back, and he went out for the year a few weeks ago. So obviously there's some injuries that hurt there. I have confidence in of DJ Jerkin to really kind of turn that team around.
Eventually. That doesn't really matter this year.
Yeah, correct. The fans aren't going to stop from continuing to expect 500 yards and 60 points a game.
Yeah, Ohio State really set a benchmark against Nebraska.
Almost to their fault.
Yeah. No, but I don't think that's the case, because I think that Maryland is so bad that even if Ohio State was playing like they did against Northwestern, they would really lay it on Maryland. I feel pretty confident in a Ohio State win by about 40 or 50.
Another drubbing.
Oh, another drubbing.
While that could possibly happen, Maryland's offense has not been, extremely terrible this season. So I really do think that maybe they might make a few touchdowns in this game. But I can only say a few because, well, let's face it, after what we watched on Saturday, I think a lot of opposing Big Ten teams are really going to have to prepare for a Buckeyes defense that looks like it was in week 1 and 2.
Yeah, I have Ohio State winning this one 51-0. I think they're just going to come in there and roll over Maryland. This is really kind of sets the tone. I think that Nebraska game, it kicked off the last third of the season here, and it was a huge motivational victory over a top 10 team at the time. And Michigan's 59-3 victory, we'll see what OSU can do in the week after Maryland played Michigan. Maybe this kind of sets the tone for that rivalry at the end of the year, when maybe these offenses are just really clicking, and you could have the two hottest teams in the country going against each other.
And as much as I really think that the Ohio State's offense, how well it played, is going to be important to them going forward, I think that the turnovers are the key to Ohio State. When you look at all of their big wins, you look at against Tulsa and Bowling Green, even though those are 2 mediocre teams, they had key turnovers that got them in good field position, and they scored on the turnovers in many cases. I have Ohio State winning 63-3. So I don't know whether they're going to get that many points, but I feel like after last week, I feel confident in them getting multiple turnovers that they're going to turn into points.
I have a little bit different take from that. I still think Ohio State's going to win this game pretty handily, but I think it's going to be 49-14. And the reason I say that is, like I said, Maryland's offense is kind of, I don't want to say sneaky good, because we've heard that phrase a few times, but I think they'll be able to find the end zone a few times. Ohio State's defense isn't going to be perfect. Nothing's ever perfect on any football team. In terms of just 49 points, funny that I have to say just 49 points. But I think this is going to be a case where Ohio State gets out in front early and by so much early enough that we're going to be able to see Joe Burrow in the game and Demario McCall in the game, just like we saw against Nebraska.
Is that leading rusher Demario McCall to you?
Yeah, very very impressive mark for him against Nebraska. You know, he got the ball quite a bit there at the end.
And now Coach Meyer says he's going to be the punt return going forward, or at least he's going to look at the tape, and I assume that that'll probably be the case. And after Dontre Wilson's latest punt return mishap, it's probably the right decision.
They actually tried Curtis Samuel back there and then played. Didn't really quite work out, but I'm not going to take anything away from him.
Yeah, you
should stop while you're ahead.
Yeah, it's funny how you just happen to throw that one in there.
Yeah.
All right, that's our show this week. Thanks to Nick and Jacob for joining us. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, everything you can think of. Instagram too. Let me just get that one in there.
I think you covered it all.
I hope so. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.